your martial arts movie podcast.
Haha! I threw that shit before I walked in the room!
Featuring drunken Thai boxer Will.
Too bad you will die.
The also drunken wrestler Mark.
I said I don't want trouble!
And drunken karate master Zero.
You've lost your balls.
And now,
Call. I know Kung Fu.
You know, baby.
Fists of Fail.
So what does it take for a movie to be added to the Criterion collection? What does it take, Zero?
They need to make sure it adheres to a certain quality because, as the name suggests, Criterion collection, it is criteria to watch, right?
Oh, I see.
So,
yes. Uh-huh.
With that being said, when they dig up material to add to the Criterion collection, they find some other crap that came along with it, or was in the same dustbin as all the other material that they needed.
Yeah. Well, I'm very stumped by this. I'm so stumped. I don't know why this is considered a required watch by any stretch of the imagination. But I am also surprised that this is on Haya, right? Because Haya typically doesn't have a lot of older films. Oh, by the way, we're finally going back to the 70s. We haven't done this in many, many months. So this is going to be one of those episodes where all the fights go on way too long.
Well, this released in 81. I think it was technically filmed in 79.
Filmed in the 70s, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Well, it definitely has a 70s vibe, but you're
yeah.
right. It was released in the 80s technically. Well, this is Game of Death 2. I'm going to call it that because Tower of Death is very misleading. Well, I don't know. Is it even because this is not even
Game of Death had a tower as well. I'm guessing that's where they derived the title from.
Yeah. But is it technically worthy of giving the moniker of a sequel? Because it really has nothing to do with the first movie, right? Not really.
Nothing. Yeah, I mean, they're just trying to squeeze that last bit of Bruce Lee excitement out after his death, because I didn't realize Game of Death 2 actually did very well at the box office.
Oh, is that why? Maybe that's the criteria or the criterion.
It did very well, and then it was very well received in Japan, so that's why they decided to make Game of Death 2 take place in Japan.
Yeah, what a strange, weird movie.
I don't think this movie is necessarily Criterion Collection material. I think it was, hey, we're doing this Bruce Lee box set or something like that. Hey, look, there's some other stuff. Let's just add it in there for bonus material.
Yeah, maybe. Well, in terms of the Bruceploitation aspect of it, by the way, of course, because it's Game of Death, right? It's a clear Bruceploitation film. The weird thing about this movie is that it straddles a line between being original and just being a straight up Bruceploitation film, right? Because at the 30-minute mark, they kind of just go, fuck it. We'll do our own thing, right?
We shouldn't say why they decide to do that, because I think it's really funny how they decide to change things up. But you are correct. It is very weird how this is using unused footage from various Bruce Lee movies, mostly from Enter the Dragon, I believe. And they kind of pull it off to varying degrees. If this was on VHS, I could imagine somebody watching this on their little CRT TV and probably thinking wow, this is brand new Bruce Lee movie. It looks kind of believable, because when you don't have a 4K scan or a 2K scan of a movie, you can't tell the difference between film grain, right?
Sure.
Or film
That's
stock. Fair. So you might believe oh wow, this is great. This is brand new Bruce Lee stuff. and then get bamboozled later on in the movie when they decide to change things up.
Yeah, well, I mean, this movie doesn't do anything egregious like getting a cutout of Bruce Lee's face, putting it against the mirror, and having some stand-in.
That is like my favorite. That's like one of my favorites. Or like just drawing with like marker on the mustache. They do. I don't know what it is. It looks like they filmed like a Bruce Lee movie onto like a ripple of water, and they like shot that. In the garden fight. I don't know. It's really strange what they did with that.
So the insert shots of older footage from other Bruce Lee media, like the quality just like dips dramatically, right? And you know, like of course, like maybe on an older CRTV you can't notice that, but I don't know. Maybe you can notice like, oh, why is the color contrast so drastically different? Why are they in a completely different environment? But yeah, I'll give it credit because at some point in the movie, they reuse a scene, you reuse a backdrop from Enter the Dragon. I was actually very impressed by that. But anyways, we'll get into that when we get into the specifics. Which, by the way, I don't think we're gonna be. It's gonna be possible for us to cover all the action in this movie. It's not even worth it, right?
There is too much. There's too much freaking action. It won't stop. It's almost annoying how much action is in this movie. I found myself getting kind of frustrated. But you know what? I think the problem is the story, because when you don't have characters to root for, when you just have nonsensical fighting that just won't end. Like, what's the point in caring about any of it, right?
Yeah. Oh God, do we have to talk about the story? All right, let me give this a shot. Huang Jiang Li is the villain of the movie. We talked about him in
you kind of spoiled it, right?
Did I?
Yeah.
Oh, I guess I did. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, come on, look at his face. I realize that he's.
Look at his face.
I mean, look at his face.
It's the mustache.
Clearly the villain.
It's the mustache. It's the mullet.
I'm sorry, but like, yeah.
Okay,
like, I guess that was a spoiler.
We won't tell you how it's revealed he's the villain. How about that?
Oh yeah. Okay, fine. I guess that was a spoiler. I guess I realized. I didn't realize like how incredibly like typecasted this guy is. So I just immediately just blurted out. But yes, he is the villain in the movie. But until then, he is. He dies early on in the film, and Bruce Lee, or quote unquote Bruce Lee, is saddened by this news, and suddenly, some person tries to steal Huang Jiang Li's corpse or his coffin during his funeral procession, and then what happens after that? Actually, like, I don't want to just go beat by beat, but like I actually don't know what the story is because then after that, like, let's just say that Bruce Lee's brother takes over the movie and tries to find out what happened to the body or who was the perpetrator of that. Let's just say that before it becomes spoiler territory.
Right. That's pretty accurate. Yeah, a little vague, but that is essentially what happens. Bruce Lee's brother, the character's name is Billy Lowe. He's played by
I got no clue. I can't
Kim
even help
Tai
you.
Chung. Yeah, okay. Kim Tai
Okay,
Chung
yeah.
plays Bruce Lee's brother, and he hears about a Tower of Death through a film.
That's right.
Oh god, yeah, we're kind of going beat by beat. He hears about a Tower of Death, and then he also wants to investigate that. So that leads him to a slew of quote-unquote colorful characters, like played by like Lewis, the African safari collector.
Oh yeah.
Played by Roy Horan, and then we meet some other characters as well.
Yeah. Wow. I know. This seems. As we're explaining it, it's actually piecing the story together better than the movie does itself.
I was really lost watching this movie.
Yeah. Well, things just happen. You're like, what? Why?
Well,
Why did that happen?
I think the reason it's so confusing is because they are doing their darndest to take unused footage from Bruce Lee films and trying to cobble it together so that they can fit dialogue with his mouth moving and try to make a coherent plot out of that. So in the beginning of the movie, it's just Bruce Lee kind of meandering about with Hwang Jung-lee, and then he meets up with some other abbots who are demonstrating or watching a demonstration of a fight scene, who then joins into that fight scene, and that actually has nothing to do with anything. And then we find out that Hwang Jung-lee dies off screen.
Yep.
I did not get that until the second viewing. I didn't know whose coffin that they were like trying to chase after, like midway during the movie. I just didn't get it until the end of the movie. I was like, oh wait, you died? I was like, when did you die?
Well, I knew that at the beginning, like my first watch as well, but then I didn't realize that like was still a pivotal part of the plot. Because after a certain point, the movie kind of meanders, and the sub-in for Bruce Lee's character, not Bruce Lee's character, it's Billy Lowe. It's not Billy Lowe, it's Bobby Lowe. That, like, as soon as that character is introduced, I was like, where is the story fucking going? I was so lost at that point. And the movie, once that character is introduced and takes over the movie, it stops using the Bruce Lee footage for the most part. It becomes almost an original film, but that doesn't mean the story makes any goddamn sense. It just jumps all over the place. I don't even know what happens towards the end. Some, like, one character gets killed, and then suddenly we're at the Tower of Death, and it's like, how did we get here? Like,
well, he followed somebody. He suspected that the Tower of Death was somewhere. He follows somebody, and his suspicions were correct. He enters the Tower of Death, and that's the problem. I don't know what his motivation is for the Tower of Death. He finds out about it because his brother had a film about it, or a film that mentioned it. So then why did he want to go there? I don't think that's ever explained, but as somebody watching the movie, that the idea of him going to the Tower of Death, like, that seems exciting, you know? Like, in Game of Death, each level has a new fighter, right?
Yep.
So I thought what was going to happen was he was going to descend this Tower of Death because it's supposedly built upside down and going into the earth. And we were going to get probably like a retreading of Game of Death where, like, he just fights somebody in, 5 rounds, 3 rounds, whatever. But it's really just one floor. It's one floor, but there's a lot of people.
You know why it's one floor?
Why is
Zero? Because this movie's false advertising. He gets to the bottom of the tower by this extremely long elevator scene. That scene will not end. I swear to God, you can get to the top of the World Trade Center and come back down and go back up one more time in the span of how long it takes for the character to go down this giant, quote unquote, giant tower. Like, I love the first movie. Like, it's a ordinary tower. This second movie, the tower is going down. I want there to be a third movie where, like, it just goes sideways.
Well, I mean, that's kind of what the end of this movie is, because he's no longer going down. He is traveling horizontally because there is a very, very long hallway after a very big fight. And then once you cross this hallway, that's kind of your final destination. So he kind of does go sideways at the end.
I love how this movie ends too. It ends on what you expect from a 70s era martial arts movie or kung fu movie. It just ends abruptly, and then there you go, credits. But then the way that this movie ends, and I won't spoil it here, but I'm like, well, you're kind of fucked.
Oh, okay. I see what you mean. Yes.
Well, I'm like, what are you gonna do now?
How does he leave?
I don't know. It's so like not well thought out, and that's the perfect way I describe this movie. It's not very well thought out, as with a lot of Bruceploitation movies at the time, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, like that. I don't know.
So, with that being said, like, how do you feel about this as a Bruceploitation film? Does it feel better than like those cheap cash grabs? Does it feel like maybe along the lines of Game of Death?
Oh man, it's been a while since we covered Game of Death. It's been several years, right?
2 years. Yep.
2 years. Yeah. My recollection of that was like, yeah, like I had problems with it, but for this movie, I don't think it's necessarily that bad. I've seen some really atrocious ones, right? And at least this movie kind of spares Bruce Lee for the most part. He's only in it primarily for the first like not even half, maybe like a third of the movie, right? He's only for the first act.
Because they ran out of footage.
Yeah, oh my god. I think they just got sick and tired of trying to hide the main actor and trying to make him look like Bruce Lee, or like try and make him, like hide his face and have all the mannerisms of Bruce Lee and all that. And after a certain point, they're like, fuck it. Well, he'll be a new character, his brother. I don't know.
So I'll say, all the stuff with Bruce Lee in it, it's fun in that aspect where you're trying to figure out how are they going to keep on cutting back and forth to a stand-in and to real Bruce Lee footage. And you kind of laugh at it, and it's kind of entertaining to see how creative they try and get to make it pass. Because it's varying degrees of passable to maybe Bruce Lee fans or just people in general. And all the Bruce Lee stuff, I think, is kind of entertaining for the most part. But then it's weird because his brother takes over for, maybe 2/3 of the movie. But it almost feels like they want his brother to still look and act like Bruce Lee.
Yeah. And, no, that's confusing.
Yeah, because there's a few times where in the beginning of the movie, they shot the actor in low light because they didn't want you to catch his face. And then, and that makes sense, because it's not really Bruce Lee, it's just a stand-in. But then later, in some of the final action scenes, it's also low lit, and I feel like you still can't see the actor's face, even though he's supposed to be a different character.
I was just gonna mention that, but it's confused. You know what it is? I wonder if the movie or like the filmmakers, because let's back up a little bit. So this is a Hong Kong production from late 70s, early 80s, right? We don't have like on-set sound production at all, right? Everything's ADR. I bet they had no story. I bet they didn't barely have dialogue. Maybe they had different dialogue. This was supposed to be the same character throughout. Right. And then at a certain point, they're like, oh yeah, we can't fake it anymore. Like, that's clearly, we're showing the actor too much. He doesn't look like Bruce at all. Fuck it. That's his brother. Let's just change all the dialogue to be him. That's his brother from now on. Right? That's my suspicion.
I'll add on to that suspicion. I think they thought they had enough footage to intersplice between the footage that they had of, what's his name? Kim Tai-chung. To do a whole movie. And then they realized 2/3 of the way through, they're like, fuck, we don't have enough. All right, let's have a way to like phase Bruce Lee out and then just transition the lead into the brother.
Maybe I don't know. So oh boy, this is a tough one, because like when the brother character is revealed, like he's clearly on screen. It's like, yeah, sure. When it's actually him, like in the fight scenes and such, like he's very acrobatic. He knows how to hit his mark, but there's something about his physical act, like his actual face when he acts. He's like always rolling his eyes. It's so fucking funny. He turns every scene into a comedy for some reason. He's like, oh well, I guess that happened.
I was just gonna say this guy is no Bruce Lee, and he's no Bruce Lee stand-in either. If that's what they were trying to do, because of all the Bruce Lee imitators, this guy is definitely the weakest. It's hard to go from seeing like Bruce Lee, even from that top-down shot of Enter the Dragon, him practicing his moves. He's very clearly muscular there. To then cutting to Kim Tai-chung. He takes off his shirt and they just fucking hosed him down to try and make him comparable to Bruce Lee. It's just, I'm sorry, like you can't do that comparison because otherwise the lesser man is going to look so much more lesser, for lack of a better word.
And I don't. Yeah, like going back to it, like it really doesn't make any sense because I really do think that it was supposed to be the same character, but they changed it once they looked at their footage and realized like, this isn't going to work because like the brother fights exactly the same way as the the original Billy Lowe character. So it's like, but they both know Jeet Kune Do, and some characters give exposition throughout the movie and said like, oh yeah, like Billy Lowe, aka Bruce Lee, was the inventor of Jeet Kune Do. Yeah, he created Jeet Kune Do. Like it was like he created it. It's like why is his brother so good at it? I don't understand that. Like, did he teach him? No, because they said before, like in the beginning of the movie, that they haven't seen each other in a long time. So I just don't understand this.
Bruce Lee leaves a book for his brother Kim Tai-chung.
You mean the porno? You mean the porno mag in the movie?
No, he throws that away. Bruce Lee throws away all his brother's porn. What a dick. No, he leaves him a book on Jeet Kune Do, and that's how you're supposed to believe that he can fight Jeet Kune Do at the end.
Oh my god.
It's it's whatever. So anyway, let's move on from the story because we could just go on about this forever.
Oh my god, yeah.
What do you think about the action, Will?
It's too long. It's too long. Well, I'll cut the movie a little bit more credit because unfortunately, a lot of movies from this era are just like that, right? They just go on way too long. They didn't really find that stride that we eventually got with more modern action movies or kung fu movies, which is, you need the big hits. Well, not only the big hits, but you need there be a varying level of intensity. Like, you want to feel like your fight scenes eventually crescendo to a point where like, holy shit, and then like, holy shit, like this is awesome, and then it hits that major like stunt or pratfall or crazy kick or whatever. That makes you go, oh, like it. That's like the proper flow. Everything here feels like a dance, like but without any sort of like high notes. It's just like everything's just very flat. Like like the stuff on screen is still technically impressive, but there's no intensity, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say like this type of choreography feels, if I was to compare it to a song, it feels like we're just watching a very long verse. There's no chorus. There's no chorus. There's nothing big, or there's nothing to change things up in terms of timing, and there's no sort of feeling like the song is coming to the end. There's no feeling of an outro. Like, it just kind of ends.
Yeah, like it's like listening to Tiny Dancer, but it just never gets to the chorus. Oh man, Anyways, no, that's a perfect analogy because there's so many fights in the movie, and I guess we're in that era where, there's this mentality of quantity over quality. But then at the same time, I can not that I empathize, but I see what the filmmakers were doing here, right? The idea was it's a Bruceploitation film, right? We want to get as much action in there as much as possible, get as much Bruce Lee footage in there, and we'll cobble the story together. But they couldn't cobble a good story, so they're like, let's just put a lot of action scenes in it and pad it out until we get to an hour and 30 minutes. And it's like, well, then everything is just mediocre. Right? The story's mediocre, the action's mediocre. well, story doesn't make any goddamn sense.
Right. Well, it's strange. Well, maybe not strange, but so the action is done by Yunwo Ping as well as Corey Yuen. I think Yunbyo also helped as well because Yunbyo did a lot of doubling for, I guess, like the flips and some of the more complicated kicks.
Yeah, I also see Sammo Hung is somehow attached to this too, but I don't
directed a deleted scene where it is Bruce Lee versus a Korean fighter. And actually, so I watched that fight. That is probably the closest, in this movie at least, that looks to a Bruce Lee style fight. You can see that Sammo is definitely channeling some Way of the Dragon in there because there's a little more weighting, there's a little more I guess like back and forth between the fighters. It feels like Bruce Lee, but it's not Bruce Lee really doing it.
Sure.
And it's not shot the way a Bruce Lee fight is shot, where it's more cameras very eye level. Here it's more varying with the types of shots, which is interesting because they're trying to get that Bruce Lee type of fight choreography in there. So it's kind of nice that it feels like a Bruce Lee fight, but it's not.
Yeah. I think I did take note of it. It's weird that this was cut from the original version. Like this is only in the international release, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and like you said, I would say that this is has the most authenticity to it. Everything you just mentioned before, but yeah, like I don't know the rest of the movie when it's Bruce Lee fighting, it's like an amalgam of like. It's mostly traditional style, like opera style, like kung fu on screen that you would expect from like the fighters on screen at the era. And then when he's done like kicking some ass, he just poses like Bruce Lee.
He does like like the Hawaiian hang.
yeah. Shaka bra, yeah.
Shaka bra. And then, like, every now and then you can see whoever is doubling for him kind of has that step, like the boxer step or the circling around the opponent sort of way to... It's not a dance, but there's a way that Bruce Lee moves that at least when you see it, like, oh yeah, they're doing a Bruce Lee sort of imitation here. So it's not bad. Like it's interesting after a few films. Either Bruce Lee was very smart and he knew exactly how he wanted to portray himself every time in those films, so he became easy to parody, or it was these, Bruce Lee didn't realize it and he only had 5 films, so people were able to extrapolate that information very succinctly because of that.
Yeah. I think we've spoken quite enough of this without, going into greater detail of the movie, and I'm gonna tell you guys. There's no way we're going to talk about all the action. It's not worth it. Part of me wants to say you should just go watch it, but I don't know. Like, well, we'll see where we land with the recommendation section because we still have yet to discuss the movie in greater detail. We'll talk about how batshit crazy the story is because some part of me is still wrapping my head around like how poorly told this movie is. But anyways, I guess there's a part where we go into our action and story breakdown. So if you guys want to listen to more of our, conversation, this is the part where you would subscribe to us on Patreon and hear more. I really hope we don't talk about this for another hour because there's nothing to talk about really.
There's so much to talk about. Will,
no,
what are you talking about?
Don't say that.
We are going to go 2 hours deep. We're going to go balls deep on Game of Death 2.
Oh, God. All right. Well, with that said, let's talk about Game of Death. Hey, guys. Thanks for listening to the podcast. We're at the point where we give our recommendations, but there's a whole wealth of audio you would be listening to here if you follow us on Patreon. There you can listen to the entire episode, including an exclusive action breakdown of the fights in the movie. And now on to our final thoughts. Yeah, that's Game of Death 2.
Game of Death 2.
Tower of Death.
Holy shit. We still Oh my god, we skipped so much fighting and we still talked an hour about this fucking movie.
Yeah. I mean, we kind of just shat all over it.
Yeah, we jumped around. That was fun though. That was that felt a lot easier to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So why would you recommend this movie, Zero? Like, tell us all the reasons why this is a high recommend for you.
I don't know. We've been talking about Donnie Yen stinkers, maybe not stinkers, very mediocre Donnie Yen movies for the past couple weeks because we're still speaking about films on Hayya, and I wanted to try to find something different. And I saw, hey, like we haven't really talked to Bruce Lee stuff in literally 2 years. So hey, let's talk Tower of Death. Let's finally close it out. Plus, I think like Arrow released a new Bruce Lee box set, like some 4K scans of some films. So I was like, yeah, why not? Let's talk about it. I watched it and I was like, dear God, I kind of regret suggesting we watch this because that was very difficult to sit through. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Oh man. No. Yeah. We even in the Patreon section, I will say, we did complain about it, but we didn't put enough emphasis on how hard it is to sit through the last 30 minutes in the movie. It is just non-stop. There is no context for what is happening. It's just constant fighting, and not in a good way. It's like my eyes are just like getting cross-eyed just watching this.
It's a shame. Yeah, if we cared about this character, if I knew where he was coming from, or at least the story was interesting, I might have enjoyed sitting through all that action in the end. But it's so hard to recommend. If you're just one of those people who are like, yeah, action, give me more fights, give me 15 minutes of fighting in the end, like, yeah, of course. Go nuts, man. Have fun watching this. I personally would rather just watch somebody's demo reel than just sitting through all this stuff. But this is a hard recommend. I guess if you're a Bruce Lee completionist and you didn't realize this movie existed, because I actually didn't realize it existed, and technically there's unseen Bruce Lee footage. So, if you need to finish off all the Bruce Lee stuff, if you went through... I mean, it's even got footage of his earlier films, much earlier when he was a child actor, if you want to see some of that footage in there, then maybe consider watching Game of Death too.
No, I even on that front, I don't agree with that. No. Like, if you are interested in that, don't watch it, because... it's out of context. It's just weird. Like, we're in the digital age now. You can find that footage anywhere on YouTube. You don't need to see it out of context, splice into a movie, try to partially make sense and cobble up a story that doesn't make any sense. But that's Bruceploitation in a nutshell, right? But I will say, in terms of Bruceploitation, not like this movie has a budget. But it has a slightly higher budget than what I'm accustomed to in terms of Bruceploitation, mostly because it's from Golden Harvest themselves. A lot of Bruceploitation films are, it's very, very tasteless, and budget's a lot on the lower end. But I will say, this is probably one of the weaker Bruceploitation films, at least my opinion, because it doesn't have that batshit craziness from as opposed to movies like Bruce Lee Lives Again, where he meets Clint Eastwood and he fights Dracula.
Is that the one when he goes to hell?
He goes to hell.
I want to watch that one. Have we watched that yet?
We have not.
Okay.
We have not.
Yeah, but somebody request that of us so we can watch that movie and not talk about Game of Death too. I mean, eventually when we're done with Hayya, maybe we'll get around to these.
Yeah. Maybe we'll do that all next year. Just non-stop Bruceploitation.
Oh God, films. Are there that many?
We'll find out the hard way.
Oh God.